Supervillains never understand superheroes. They like to think they do. But what we hear in supervillain attacks is really just projecting their own fears and insecurities. Let's talk about supervillains. If I'm using superheroes to talk about living with mental health or neurodivergence, then where do supervillains fit in? Well, let's start with our first supervillain stigma and 3 key concepts that explain how embracing your superpowers helps shut down stigma. First, stigma acts like a supervillain in the movie of our lives. Second, using supervillain characters easily explains how stigma impacts us. And third, this approach helps us find and use the tools to defeat stigma. So how does stigma act like a supervillain in the movie of our lives? Well, let's compare how and why they both attack. First, stigma takes misunderstandings about us and our diagnoses and turns it into fear, bias, and well, even justification for seeing us and treating us differently. Now the thing is that supervillains never understand superheroes. They like to think they do. But what we hear in supervillain attacks, those monologues, is really just projecting their own fears and insecurities onto the superhero. It's also why they either launch sneak attacks or open the fight with some degrading verbal attack, the infamous supervillain monologue. Both are designed to hide their fear, throw the superhero off their game, and even justify attacking them. Hands up if you have ever experienced a stigma sneak attack. Those interactions that someone else didn't even realize was stigmatizing and hurtful. Maybe it was the language casually used in conversation, or a policy or practice at school or work that those who don't share your lived experience see as fair, normal, and okay. Those sneak attacks are disorienting. And that's what both stigma and the supervillains are hoping for, to catch us off guard and make us unable to fight back. Other times stigma is thrown right in our face with words and actions that are direct attacks on us and our diagnosis. Exactly like the bullying behavior of a supervillain monologue, which is really never more than a long-winded rant of name-calling and, again, justifying their attack. Second, stigma and supervillains share the same attacks because they share the same goal, to have us seen as less than what we really are so that we are easier to control or defeat. Stigma preserves the current injustices we face and perpetuates them. These hold us back while allowing the biases we face to continue and grow, rather than evolve into a more equitable and inclusive situation. And the bigger the problem gets, the harder it is to fight back. Sounds exactly like supervillains who want to clear superheroes out of the way to grow their own power and empires. 3, stigma, like a supervillain, sees its power not just in singular attacks, but in undermining us with repeated monologues to keep us in our place. So what can seem like overwhelming in these moments is not just this experience we're having, but the fact that it's not the first or the last one in our lives. This is demoralizing. And that's what both supervillains and stigma are counting on. They want us to give up and roll over so that they can have their way. So when we take a superhero perspective, we see stigma for what it really is. A bully that can ultimately be defeated. Like superheroes, we need to know our supervillain, their weaknesses, and stocking our utility belts with the tools that target their weaknesses. So, if we see stigma as a supervillain, you're probably wondering what characters can we look at that might help explain the role and the impact of stigma and give us insight into how we can strengthen ourselves and work to defeat it. Well, I've got a couple really great examples. So let's start with those. Thanos and Obadiah Stane. And let's start with Obadiah. Now, Obadiah is a supervillain who is a bully pretending to be a friend. Someone whose insecurities are greater than their empathy. He is the master of the sneak attack. Now, Obadiah is jealous of Tony Stark's intelligence and power. He doesn't understand Tony's trauma and losing his parents and how it shapes Tony's behavior. He just sees the inconvenience of that behavior to him, and that Tony gets the spotlight he feels he deserves. Obadiah's jealousy and insecurity ultimately lead him to betray Tony, plotting his assassination, stealing his technology, and finally coming to a face-to-face battle. Obadiah represents the stigma we face from those who say that they support and understand us, but are really focused on the inconvenience our diagnosis causes them. And they make it difficult for us to call out these kinds of stigmatizing words and actions because they throw it back at us with, oh, how much they've helped us or how we couldn't manage without them. This overall attack by Obadiah can really be summed up as, you're not as smart or special as you think you are, I'm better than you. Obadiah gives us a supervillain character who justifies their camouflage stigmatizing behaviors because they feel they are entitled to either reward and the hero spotlight, or if they can't get that, then they have the right to lash out. This is emotional blackmail and a form of stigma and abuse. Thanos lacks that subtlety. He is literally the titan of stigma and right up in your face with his justifications. You don't see the big picture like I do, and you just don't understand my good intentions. Hands up if your diagnosis has led someone to say something similar as they talk down to you. This is the stigma that calls into question our abilities and our motivations about seeking empathy, supports, or even just plain old understanding. And then he uses the excuse that their actions are doing something for the greater good, not just us. So while Obadiah engages in emotional blackmailing, this is just flat out bullying. How often have you dealt with a policy, practice, or a person in authority where they try to shut you down with a message that can be summed up as, you're not as special as you think you are. I'm the real hero here. This is the stigma that also calls our lived experience into question. Because, like Thanos, somebody else thinks that they know better than you do and thinks that their intentions matter more than the impact that their actions have on you and others. So using characters like Thanos and Obadiah, we can see that at its core, stigma is really nothing more than a supervillain's monologue full of insecurity and fear, and reminding us that we, like superheroes, can defeat them by knowing what we're up against and seeing how in the end we are always more powerful. Seeing stigma as a supervillain in a superhero perspective makes it easier to defeat it because it allows us to see stigma, like these supervillains' monologues, for what they really are. Untrue, cowardly, because really they're just a form of bullying, trying to wear us down before their own weaknesses are revealed, and an attempt to keep us off our game and not using our powers to our advantage. Stigma is grounded in profound misunderstanding of our diagnosis and our lived experience. What is said to us has the same value as a supervillain's monologue. It's a lot of insecurity, arrogance, and bluster trying to pass for the truth. Both hope that if they repeat themselves often enough and loud enough that we will cave in and be easy to defeat. So much stigma is meant to shut down and downplay our strengths. How many times have traits or behaviors associated with your diagnosis been thrown back at you, like character flaws and laden with judgment? I know I personally stopped counting ages ago. Guess what? When you experience that, it's really somebody else projecting their own insecurities back at you. They are just as afraid of stigma as you are, but they've accepted it as inevitable. Wait, who thought he was inevitable? Right, Thanos. And in the end, was he? Not so much. This is why seeing things through a superhero perspective is so useful. It's easy and it's effective. It helps us to see stigma for what it really is. And it gives us the tools to take it down just like superheroes take down supervillains. We see the supervillain for what it is, and as a result, we can become better prepared to both defend ourselves against it and build up strengths to shut it down, ignore, or even redirect the monologue it throws at us. And that's why everything from simple reframing exercises and other evidence-based tools are what I've integrated into the Embrace Your Superpower program to do just that. Help us individually and collectively shut down the supervillain of stigma that tries to take over our world. If you want to learn more, like and subscribe to this channel for more videos, post your comments and questions below, follow us on social media, you'll see the links below, and click on the link below for www.speak-up.co and learn more about the Embrace Your Superpowers program, which includes the new online membership community. And here you can enroll in self-paced courses with tools and resources that are built around understanding specific diagnoses and the issues that come with living with mental health and neurodivergence diagnoses.